Hey everyone, my name is Sean, and in today's video we're going to be doing a card tier list for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel Season 4. Before we begin, I would like to say that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a diverse game with a pool of over 10,000 cards. This list was created by comparing over 100 deck lists which topped Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel tournaments. The intention of this video is to support and help players with choosing what to buy and craft. Treat every purchase as an investment and maximize the value gained. This list highlights generically used cards across multiple types of decks. This is to be useful to as many people as possible who watch this video. A card which does not make this list is not objectively bad, and as the game evolves, new trends will follow. Spend wisely. We are going to go into the tier list in a moment, and then after the tier list is done, I quickly want to talk about deck building in this game. Once you kind of understand the data and ways that people are using this data to build their decks currently in Master Duel. I also want to start off by just saying that right now my channel is almost about to reach 5,000 subscribers. That would be an amazing milestone for me to hit, so if this video is useful to you at all, feel free to hit the like button, leave a comment down below, and hit the subscribe button for more videos like this, as my intention right now is to try and do this every single month to help newer players come into the game understand what the best things are to look for in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Furthermore, all of the cards in the game that we're going to talk about in this list will be listed in the description of this video, so you can go and look them up yourself. But if you don't know necessarily where to find those cards, feel free to leave me a comment down below and I'll let you know which packs they're available in or whether they're only available with crafted points. The tier list of this video is designed to be very close. I didn't really feel comfortable with having say an S tier or a D tier, or having a tier 1 to tier 5. It didn't really make sense to me for cards to be ranked that way. Every card I talk about in this video is going to be a good card overall. As I said, there's over 10,000 cards in the game, so if you manage to make a small list of the best cards in the game, you've got to be pretty good. And like I said, all of these cards were showing up in tournament results, so they must have some value somewhere. Where they differ is in how popular they are and how impactful those cards are. At the top we'll have cards which are the most popular and the most impactful in the game right now, and then it goes down towards cards which I can consider to be niche cards, very specific for certain situations, or there are cards which are used but there are better options available to you right now in the game. We're going to start this off by illustrating with a hand trap in the game, and the hand trap we're going to talk about is Effect Veiler, which is a B+ card. Effect Veiler is a hand trap that can be used only during your opponent's main phase, and you can discard it to negate the effect of a face-up monster your opponent controls. This is very good because Effect Veiler is not a hard once per turn. Also, Effect Veiler is a level 1 light spellcaster monster, meaning that she has a lot of synergy with a lot of other decks' main deck strategies as well. Effect Veiler, being a light monster, can be used from your graveyard in an invoke deck to be banished to help and summon out Invoke Mechaba, or even if she's not useful in a certain situation and she's sitting in your hand, you can use it in a Shadow deck to fusion summon out El Shadow Construct, being that she's a light monster. Furthermore, she is a tuner monster as well, which means she can be summoned out from your deck from a card like Crystal Halki Firebags, which is really good and a very popular card in the game right now. Furthermore, with Halki Firebags and Effect Veiler on the field, you can use them together as link materials to summon out Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians, and the Selene can revive her from the graveyard, so you have a link 3 and a level 1 monster on the board that can be then used to make a link 4 monster. This strategy is often popularized in decks such as Sky Striker, where Veiler can be very popular for this exact reason. In addition, she can be used in Synchro decks as well, being that she's a level 1 tuner, so you can summon out another monster to the board to help her use for your Synchro based strategies. Veiler has a wide range of applications, but her downsides are in her effect itself. As I said, Veiler can only be used during your opponent's main phase. In addition, the ability of targeting one monster your opponent controls and negating their effects isn't really that powerful today in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! By leaving that monster on the field still, it can be used as a link material for a link summon, a material for an XE summon, or a material for a synchro summon once its effect is negated. So you really haven't done a whole lot to stop your opponent in their track. And if the point of a hand trap is to stop your opponent and interrupt them, then Vader isn't really fitting that bill overall, because she kind of just slows them down, but not even really that much. So as a hand trap, she's very, very less effective right now. A card that is very similar to Vader, but definitely is a better option available right now, is Infinite Impermanence. Infinite Impermanence has many benefits. One, Infinite Impermanence is actually a trap card, and because of that, it means it can't be negated by many of the things that will negate an event failure. Also, Infinite Impermanence can be activated at any point of a duel as long as you have no cards on your side of the field, which means it can be used in the standby phase, the battle phase, even the end phase, not just like the main phase where effect failure can only be used. Infinite Impermanence also has the added benefit of that once you have a card in the field, you can set it to the field, and then you can negate the effect of a spell or trap card that is in the same column as Infinite Impermanence. And once you do that, it means that this card really has more than one use overall. Infinite Impermanence does suffer from the same similar weaknesses as Event Failure though, where again, negating just one monster effect on the field isn't really that impactful. And again, when you have Infinite Impermanence in your hand, you might want something that can shut down your opponent more than what an Impermanence will provide for you. But because it's so versatile in the format right now, it's a more popular card than Vader, and it sits nicely at A tier. We're now going to go back to B tier. We're going to look at two cards in tandem. We're going to look at Skullmeister and DD Crow. DD Crow and Skullmaster are both popular cards as they prevent graveyard manipulation both together and also separately. DD Crow is a proactive card which can remove any card in your opponent's graveyard by activating this card from your hand, whereas Skullmeister will negate the effect of a monster effect. They both have good applications, where DD Crow can get rid of something in your opponent's graveyard before they get to use it, and Skullmeister can negate the effect of something that activates in their graveyard once they have used it. Both have their benefits, both have their weaknesses, but they both are very, very well used cards. But something that kind of does what they do but better is Ghostbelle and Haunted Mansion. Ghostbelle and Haunted Mansion is a card that can negate the activation of effect of a card that will try to send a card from the deck to the graveyard, will try to add a card from the graveyard to the hand, or will try to banish the card in the graveyard. It has a wider range of applications than say a Skullmeister and DD Crow does, and so the Ghostbelle and Haunted Mansion is often more favoured than these cards. It's not always generic though. All of these cards are very good against decks such as Drytron, Eldritch, and Tri-Brigade Zodiac or Tri-Brigade Pure, some of the most popular decks in the game right now. But there are always going to be strategies where these cards are a little bit less effective, where your opponent doesn't really care if they're used against them or not. And they don't have a lot of synergy with many other strategies, say like Effect Vader does, where they can be used for other things. So these cards aren't always favoured to be put in their deck. What we do know is with the game right now is when people are choosing to use Ghostbelle and Haunted Mansion, they are only using maybe one, maybe even two copies at the most of Ghostbelle and Haunted Mansion, as there are many other cards people want to put in their decks that take higher priority than this card that they would rather use instead of Ghostbelle and Haunted Mansion. But all three are very, very good in the game right now. Moving on, we are going to now talk about another card that likes to be anti-graveyard, and that card is going to be Dimensional Shifter. Dimensional Shifter is the embodiment of a niche hand trap. This card can only be used from your hand when you have no cards in your graveyard. In a nutshell, or to put this in context, this really can only be used on your very, very first turn. Any later than that, and you're very likely to have a card in your graveyard, and this card will be dead. In addition, let's talk about more downsides for this card. This card is a level 6 spellcaster monster, which doesn't have a lot of synergy with many strategies in the game right now, so you can't really use it in many other ways, other than maybe say discard fodder for something else. But Dimensional Shifter is incredibly powerful, for once it uses its effect, any card that is sent to the graveyard will be banished until the end of the opponent's next turn, and against many decks in the game, this is very, very powerful. Most decks cannot survive having their cards banished when they are sent to the graveyard, as it disrupts their strategies quite heavily and their ability to grind later through the duel. So Dimensional Shifter is a very good blowout card. But the downside again is that it doesn't really work with a lot of decks. Some strategies love Dimensional Shifter, for example Grand Marju and or Thunder Dragon, they would love to have this card around. But other than that, it kind of works against you in many situations. But when Dimensional Shifter is good, it's an absolute blowout card, so it can be very powerful. Similarly to Dimensional Shifter is Artifact Lancea, where Dimensional Shifter says all cards sent to the graveyard will be banished. Lancea says no cards can be banished until the end of the turn. Artifact Lancea can only be used during your opponent's turn, however, and so it isn't necessarily something you can do during both players' turn as well. Lancea can be very powerful against many popular strategies in the game right now. Tri-Brigade like to banish in order to use their link summon based effects while their monsters are in the field. Drytron love to banish for card effects like Eva in order to get more resources out of their deck. And Eldritch like to banish their trap cards during the end phase to get more trap cards and set them directly to the field. So it works in many situations and works very well against a lot of top tier decks. But there will of course be situations where this card doesn't really do anything at all. For example, against say Prank Kids, it has maybe one card it can work against, which would be Meow's effect that works to give Battle Butler an extra tribute summon, extra tribute for cost. But other than that, it's not really doing a whole lot in terms of countering that deck. So there will be times when Lancea will be dead. And similarly to Dimensional Shifter, because it is a level 5 fairy monster, it doesn't really have a whole lot of synergy with many strategies. So often if you can't use it for its main primary purpose, you're not really going to use it in many other ways. But when it is useful, it is very powerful. We're now going to talk about a card that is very good against combo decks that likes to blow them out of the sky and literally crash onto them, and that will be Nibiru the Primal Being. And Nibiru the Primal Being is going to go dead in the middle on to A+ tier. No, it's on to A tier, my apologies. Nibiru the Primal Being is a card that says once your opponent has summoned more than 5 times during the turn, you can, during their main phase, tribute all monsters on the field and summon this card to the field. And then they will get a token that has attack and defense equal to all of the monsters that were tributed. Nibiru is the ultimate shutdown card for a lot of combo decks, and the most powerful combo decks in the game right now have ways to counter Nibiru, such as Herald of Orange Light, for example, or Herald of Arc Light, or even Apollousa in Tri-Brigade. Now, Nibiru the Primal Being, however, is a really good card to kind of balance the scales against your opponent, for punishing them for summoning too many monsters in one turn. And so when Nibiru is very useful, it is absolutely amazing. Plus, you get a free monster to the board with a 3000 attack, which can be used to then attack your opponent in the next turn. So it's very good for that. It is like a level 10, I believe it's a rock monster, a level 10 rock monster, or maybe some other type, and it doesn't have a lot of synergy with a lot of decks. But one big weakness of Nibiru is that, again, a lot of people are prepared for it, and one benefit of Nibiru is that it tributes monsters, so that gets past getting them off the field without having to actually destroy them. So Nibiru is a very good card right now, but isn't always applicable to many strategies. For example, against a deck like Eldritch, doesn't really care about them at all. Shadows, they don't need to summon more than 5 times in order to set up a monster like Winder or Construct. And many other decks are very similar. So there are some times when you have a Nibiru in your hand and it just sits there doing nothing, meaning you've got essentially a very large brick. But when Nibiru is useful, you almost always want it around. A card that is very similar to Nibiru that's also on A tier is Droll and Lockbird. Droll and Lockbird makes it so that neither player can add cards from their deck to the hand for the rest of the turn after your opponent just used an effect like that. And so Droll and Lockbird is very powerful against decks like Drytron that will search so many times in a turn, and then with a crazy board of powerful negate monsters and like 5 cards in their hands as well to discard for a cost of Herald of Ultimateness or Herald of Perfection. Droll Lockbird can shut down many players, but then it also works against yourself. So if you use it during your turn, be very careful about using this against your opponent. Now, you might think to yourself, why would I ever use this in your turn? Well, Droll Lockbird in my own turn. Well, Droll Lockbird also works against another very popular played hand trap, being Maxx C. So it shuts down your opponent's ability to get to use Maxx C, but it also shuts down your chances of using Maxx C because it works in against both players. So if you've resolved Maxx C against your opponent and you're drawing and you're looking for more hand traps and you get Droll Lockbird, you have to be careful because you will stop yourself getting more cards out of Maxx C. Essentially speaking, Maxx C is one of the most popular cards in the game right now, and so if you have a Maxx C in your hand and a Droll Lockbird, you're kind of forced to choose between which effect you're going to resolve, because Droll Lockbird will shut down your own Maxx C, but Maxx C can get you more cards. So it's kind of difficult, and because of Maxx C's popularity, it often takes priority over Droll Lockbird, and you'll find out more why when we talk more about Maxx C. But I wanted to point that out to you about some of the weaknesses of Droll Lockbird. Furthermore, again, it doesn't have a high synergy. It is a wind spellcaster monster and doesn't really work in a lot of other decks. And it has 0 attack, 0 defense, so it's a very weak monster other than its effect and doesn't have a lot of synergy. Now, a card that is very, very powerful in the format right now is Psy-Framegear Gamma. Psy-Framegear Gamma is a very popular card. It's the third most popular hand trap in the game right now, and Psy-Framegear Gamma is amazing. It does the job of an effect veiler, and it does the job of destruction because it can negate the activation of a card effect, a monster's effect, and then destroy that card. What's amazing about Psy-Framegear Gamma is that this can apply to monsters on the field, but it can also apply to effects activated in your opponent's hand, and also effects that activate in your opponent's graveyard, banish power, doesn't matter. Wherever the monster effect is used, Gamma can destroy it and negate it. The downside is that Gamma comes with a very, very high cost to be able to use. First of all, Gamma cannot be normal summoned or set as per its effect. Also, when Gamma is used, or in order to use Gamma, you must control no monsters whatsoever on the field to begin with. And then finally, in order to resolve Gamma's effect, you must be able to special summon a Psy-Frame driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard to the field. Meaning, sometimes you will end up drawing a vanilla level 6 monster that will do nothing to benefit your deck, and you will kind of wish you had something else. So Gamma comes with a lot of maintenance costs, but you can use Gamma cleverly to kind of play around many effects. Gamma can be used reactively to other popular hand traps when you say use a spell card. For example, if you say activate a spell card that allows you to draw or search, and your opponent goes and responds with Ash Blossom, you can then negate the Ash Blossom with Psy-Framegear Gamma. In addition, many combo decks get stopped in their tracks by Psy-Framegear Gamma, so it's a really good card to use when you know you're going to go second, and particularly in this format where everybody wants to go first, Psy-Framegear Gamma can be very, very effective, which is why it's currently at A+. Without surprise, the S-tier hand traps in the game right now are Ash Blossom and Maxx C. Maxx C, particularly in Master Duel, has had such a profound effect on people's decks and the way we build decks because it is absolutely everywhere. But it is not as popular and as widely used as Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom is by far the most popular card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Period. And if you're new to the game, you want to get free Ash Blossoms ASAP. There's a bundle that even gives you one, so feel free to go and grab that as well. But what is phenomenal about Ash and Maxx C is how they have created a sub-meta in Master Duel by their effects alone. Maxx C says that once it has resolved, during the turn, anytime your opponent special summons, you will get to draw a card. This is fondly referred to as the Maxx C challenge, because your opponent then has to decide, do I keep on special summoning and giving my opponent more free cards, or do I take the challenge, still play the game, but then my opponent's going to have a very, very large hand to kind of break my board and counter me. There are very, very few decks in the game that can take the Maxx C challenge and survive to tell the tale, although there are a few examples here and there. Now, what is amazing about, what is very unique about Maxx C is that it is very, very easy to use, and it is played in almost every single deck right now. But that's where Ash Blossom comes in. Ash Blossom is an amazing hand trap, and it negates any effect that will try and add or draw cards from your opponent's deck to their hand. It is very, very useful, and or even special summon a monster to the field. It's very, very useful, and it has a wide, has probably the most applications it can be used for in Yu-Gi-Oh! But Ash Blossom has become a staple in this game because it also negates Maxx C, as Maxx C is a draw effect. So there's this really crazy kind of chicken game dynamic where one opponent knows that they have Maxx C in their hand, but they know that their opponent might have Ash Blossom to counter it. A lot of players are holding their Ash Blossom just so they can counter their opponent's Maxx C, so they don't have to take the Maxx C challenge. And so there's this really interesting dynamic in the game between these two hand traps. But that's not all. It also kind of bleeds into how you choose whatever else you're going to play in your deck as well. Psy-Framegear Gamma is a very good example of this, as Gamma can negate both a Maxx C or an Ash Blossom if it is able to activate. And so that is also another reason why it's in the meta. For if you want to, say, use your Ash Blossom to negate a spell card, you can use your Gamma to negate their opponent's Maxx C instead. And so you're kind of playing these kind of mind games with your opponent a lot. These cards don't just bleed into hand traps, they also bleed into tech cards as well. And another card to really consider here, or another two cards we can even talk about, are Crossout Designator and Call by the Grave. Call by the Grave is a spell card that targets one monster in your opponent's graveyard, banishes it, and until the end of the next turn, all monsters with that card's name will be negated. And then Crossout Designator can respond to an opponent's activation by banishing a card from the deck in order to negate the activation of that effect for the rest of the turn. Both cards are very, very good for countering commonly played cards like Maxx C and Ash Blossom, and so you're seeing in pretty much every single deck at least 3 Maxx C, 3 Ash Blossom, 2 Call by the Grave, and 1 to 3 Crossout Designator, depending on how many other meta cards that person is running in their deck that they think they'll be able to use Crossout Designator for. It's really quite fascinating when you analyze the meta right now and see how these cards interact, and they all are pretty much because of Maxx C's relevancy in the game right now. So you have to be prepared for countering Maxx C and Ash Blossom in this game, and so Call by the Grave and Crossout Designator are 2 top tier cards as well that fulfill this role. Another card that kind of fulfills this role, another sequence of cards that kind of fulfill this role, are pot cards. So that includes Pot of Duality, which is a B plus tier card, Pot of Extravagance, which is a A- card. We have Pot of Prosperity. Where are you, Prosperity? Sorry, this is Extravagance, this is Prosperity. Pot of Prosperity is A tier card, Pot of Extravagance is A-, and then we have no, I am getting this completely wrong. This is... How am I screwing this up? How am I mixing up my pot cards? Oh my god, how am I doing this? Pot of Prosperity is this card here. This is Pot of Prosperity. This is Desires, and this is Extravagance. Oh my god. That's never happened to me before. Okay, fine. So, Pot of Extravagance is A. Pot of Duality is B. Pot of Desires is A. A-, whatever. You can see it on the screen. Sorry, I'm completely choking here. Pot cards. Pot cards are very popular in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel right now. Pot cards allow you to obviously draw more cards or excavate, whatever they do. Pot of Extravagance allows you to excavate the top 3 cards in your deck, but then for the rest of the turn you can't draw cards and your opponent takes half damage. Desires banishes 10 cards from the top of your deck and then lets you draw 2 cards. Extravagance lets you draw 2 cards but banishes 3 to 6 cards from your extra deck. And Duality lets you excavate to choose 1 card, but you cannot special summon. Each of them are usable in a variety of decks, but the question is, why are people choosing to play these cards? Well, all of the pot cards are normal spell cards, which means they can be used to try and bait out your opponent's Ash Blossom. So it is another way of using starter cards in your deck to kind of counter the fact that your opponent very likely has an Ash Blossom. So what a lot of people are doing is they're using a pot card to kind of say, do you have an Ash? Are you going to negate it? Are you going to stop me? And then they say, okay, right, you've used your Ash Blossom, hard once per turn, you can't use it anymore. and then they'll go into their combo, or they'll use another starter to carry on. That will be completely safe because the Ash Blossom has been used. It can also be used vice versa as well. You can use another starter, for example, Fire Formation Tenki, for example. See if your opponent has an Ash Blossom, and if they do negate it, then later on you have a pot card that you can then use that will be completely safe and sound. Their popularity kind of depends. Prosperity is the easiest to use card, as it requires you only to banish 3 cards from your extra deck to excavate the top 3 cards. You can also go a bit harder than that and banish 6 cards to excavate the top 6 cards of your deck if you're really desperate to look for something. Desires and Extravagance are both favorable because they allow you to draw 2, but depending on whether your strategy is extra deck based, or if you like to special summon, you might use Desires. But if you don't care about special summoning and you don't want to really care about your extra deck, people prefer to use Extravagance. No, sorry, it has nothing to do with special summon. My apologies. It's just about what you're banishing, whether you want to banish your main deck or you want to banish your extra deck. And then Pot of Duality again says you cannot special summon the turn you use this card, but Duality, other than that, is quite free and very reliable to use. So take your pick. They're all super rares and they're all very useful currently in the meta right now. Moving on, let's see. We've talked about Pot, we've talked about Ash, we've talked about Maxx C, we've talked about how these cards are very impactful. Let's talk about some trap cards. Let's talk about Rivalry of Warlords and Mistake. Both very commonly played cards right now in the game. Rivalry Warlords makes it so that both players can only control one type of monster, and Mistake makes it so that both players cannot add cards from their deck to their hand. It's kind of like a continuous trap version of Draw a Lot Bird. Both cards are very powerful in the game, and against very meta decks like Drytron and Tri-Brigade, they're very good against those decks. You often see these cards used in decks such as L-Lich and other back row heavy decks like True Draco, for example, maybe. They're both very good, they're both very powerful, but they're less used than some other continuous trap cards in the game. For example, Imperial Order and Skill Drain. Both of these are more generic than these two cards, where Skill Drain can negate the face-off effects of all monsters on the field, and Imperial Order negates the effect of all spell cards on the field. Both are incredibly powerful effects right now. Many decks cannot deal with these two cards, and if they haven't got a way to get rid of it, they're kind of pretty much just auto win buttons. And in the right strategy that can play around these cards, they're absolutely fine. They're obviously used in decks like L-Lich, but there are many other decks like even Dark Magician, which can use a Skill Drain. And what's fascinating right now in Master Duel is Skill Drain is at 3 copies, it's unlimited, which really in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Hasn't really happened much. You never really had free Skill Drain. I think maybe during Yang Z era, you maybe had free Skill Drain. I think maybe then you had multiples, but after that era, it's always been at 1. So these two are very powerful cards and a little bit more useful than these two cards. We're now going to have a look at a extra deck monster, Borrelsword Dragon. Borrelsword was the king of the Master Rule 4 meta. It was the best link monster in the game, and this card just wins you game overall. It is a link 4 monster that when it attacks, that is 3000 attack, that when it attacks your opponent's monster, it can half their attack and add it to Borrelsword. Meaning that no matter what a Borrelsword does, every time it attacks a monster in attack position, it will guaranteed do 3000 damage, unless that monster is unaffected by card effects. And even then, he can still add the attack to him, so he'll still get a boost and go from 3000 to whatever he managed to add. Borrelsword also has another effect. It has a quick effect of being able to change the battle position of one monster on the field, and if it does so, it gets an additional attack that turn. So Borrelsword can go for game very quickly by attacking an opponent's monster, doing 3000 damage, and then if it can attack directly, that's 6000 damage in a single turn. It's very easy to make, it's generic, it's a link 4 monster, but it's not as popular as another card right now in the game. And the most popular link monster in the game right now is, that it's not him, it is Accesscode Talker. Accesscode Talker doesn't get the benefit of being a double attacker like Borrelsword, but when Accesscode Talker is made using League 3 monster like Knightmare Phoenix, Knightmare Unicorn, it gets 3000 additional attack, boosting it from 2300 to 5300. And while you're not getting the same 6,000 damage that Borrelsword Dragon does, what you are getting is an easier to summon monster that has a little bit more utility. Accesscode Talker only requires you to, is a link 4 monster too, but only requires 2 sets of effect monsters, whereas Borrelsword requires you to use at least 3 monsters on the field, making this card a lot easier to summon. Furthermore, you can banish cards from your graveyard or your field, to, link monsters specifically, to destroy cards in your opponent's field. Now what's great about Accesscode Talker is when it activates its effect, your opponent cannot respond to those activations, meaning it can break a board very, very quickly, and it's what's putting it right now in S tier. It has a lot of things going for it. It's a very, very powerful card, and it is what is a lot of decks are using right now over Borrelsword to win games. We may as well talk about Knightmare Unicorn as we just added it to the list. Knightmare Unicorn is an A+ card right now, particularly because a lot of people like to go into it to summon it to use its effect before going into Accesscode Talker. It is a link 3 monster that requires 2 monsters to summon, and then when it is summoned to the field, you can discard a card, target it, and shuffle it back into the opponent's deck. This has a wide range of applications, and because it doesn't destroy that card, it can bypass a lot of protection effects very, very easily. And as said, it's a very good link 3 monster to use to go into Accesscode Talker. You often see these two together. But then there's the Unicorn's little brother, Phoenix. Knightmare Phoenix is a A-tier card right now. It is a link 2 monster, which is a lot easier to make than Unicorn. But when this card is summoned to the field, you can discard 1 card from your hand to destroy a spell and trap card in the field. It is often relied upon in many decks as another source of spell and trap removal, as many decks don't main deck spell and trap removal right now in the game. So they prefer to use monsters to make Knightmare Phoenix, and then use that instead to get rid of a really annoying spell and trap card. Now, there are some times where it won't really work. Say, if a skill drain is already on the board, Knightmare Phoenix isn't really that useful, as the opponent can chain and then negate the effect of it. But it's still a very, very good card overall. And because it only takes up the space in your extra deck, it doesn't really hurt you to put this card in your deck unless you really need that 1 space for a different card. We're going to climb back up the ranks right now. Excuse me. Excuse me. We're going to climb back up the ranks right now to another A-tier card, and that is going to be a Lightning Storm. Lightning Storm is often used as the go second spell trap removal card in the game. People play this at 2 more than anything else, and it is used in many, many decks right now. Lightning Storm requires that you have no face-up cards on the field to use, so it's often used going second, because when you go first, you're pretty much going to have a face-up card to set up your board. But it doesn't mean it's always there later on in the duel. If you have set cards on your field and no face-up cards, you can still use a Lightning Storm later on. In addition, it has the ability to be able to choose whether you want to destroy monsters in attack position or monsters in or spell and trap cards on the field, meaning it can be used against many, many different decks. So it's a very, very powerful card to use, and it's been very, very popular. What's really great about Lightning Storm right now is that Lightning Storm it says in its effect that you can only activate 1 Lightning Storm per turn. But if your opponent uses a card in the game, let's say Solemn Judgment, to negate the activation of the effect, you can then use another copy of Lightning Storm again, because it says you can only activate 1. If the activation was negated, then you haven't activated it, so you get to use another copy of it. And it's really, really cool for baiting out cards to players that don't understand this, where you can go Lightning Storm, negate the activation, okay, Lightning Storm, and they're like, what? How does that work? But it does. If a card says you can only use it once per turn and the activation gets negated, then fine, you can only use it once per turn. You can't use another one. But if it says you can only activate 1, then you can use it again if you have multiple copies. So people are playing this usually at 2 in many, many decks right now. I want to talk about Solemn Judgment later. First of all, I want to talk about Raigeki. Raigeki is a D-tier card, but it's still quite popular in the game. It's very easy to use this Raigeki. Destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Raigeki is best used to bait out interruptions. So if your opponent puts a board full of monsters with multiple negates, you just play Raigeki, knowing that they're going to have to negate it, and then hopefully that's one less thing for you to deal with. It's reliable, it's easy to use, and I think in Master Duel they just give you a Raigeki. So it's clearly very popular because it's very easy to obtain. So that card hits the list as well. Now, where Raigeki is a B plus tier card for destroying all your opponent's monsters, Harpie's Feather Duster is a S tier card right now for destroying all spell and trap cards on your opponent's field. It's just reliable. It's the easiest card to use in the world. You just play it and destroy all their spell and trap cards. There are no activation requirements. There's no particular situations. You draw it, and then if your opponent has cards on the field, you just blow them off the field. Great at baiting interruptions. You could use it before a lightning storm, so you get rid of their back row and then destroy their front row. It's very, very good for that. And so, yeah, it's a really great board breaker card right now. Another card that's a very powerful board breaker right now, is everywhere in the game, is Forbidden Droplets. Forbidden Droplets is a card that says you can send any number of cards from your field or your hand to the graveyard to negate and half the attack of monsters your opponent controls on the field. In addition, your opponent cannot activate any card that you of the same type of card that you send. So if you send a spell card, they can't activate any spell cards in response to the activation. Same with effect monsters. Forbidden Droplets is a very reliable card to use in the game right now, as everybody's playing hand traps and everybody's playing spells. And so what you often do with a Forbidden Droplet is you play a card like a Harpie Feather Duster, like a Raigeki, Pot of Duality, a Pot of Prosperity, or so on, and you activate to the field, and you wait for your opponent to respond. If your opponent then responds, you chain your own Forbidden Droplet to send that card you already activated to the graveyard as one of the things to use to negate a monster effect on the field. Then, if you have multiple cards you want to get rid of, say there are cards in your hand like hand traps, like maybe a Psy-Framegear Driver you've drawn earlier into the game, you can send that also, and your opponent won't be able to activate monster effects in response to this. That will often shut off a lot of their negations, and so Forbidden Droplet is a very, very versatile card in the game, and it's often seen in decks at 3 right now. It's very, very good, very, very powerful, and yeah, it's just very effective at breaking boards and for getting past those pesky negates. On the list, let's do some more detail cards. We've got Cosmic Cyclone, and also Twin Twisters. Let's do that too. Both are spell and trap removal cards. Twin Twister, discard 1 card and destroy 2 spell and trap cards on the field, whereas Cosmic Cyclone, pay 1000 life points and banish 1 spell and trap card on the field. Both have their benefits. Any deck that runs, say, a Harpie Feather Duster and multiple Twin Twister is going to be really good against back row decks. But then there are certain back row decks which activate spell and trap cards in the graveyard, such as Lich, and so having a Cosmic Cyclone might be more preferable. At the moment, most people are going for Harpies plus Lightning Storms, but you could easily have these 2 cards as well if you don't have your Lightning Storms. It really depends on what you're playing and what situation you're in and what works well against you, but they're both equally very, very good cards. Let's see, we may as well go ahead and do Evenly Match. Evenly Match is another board breaker card right now, that's very popular. Evenly Match says at the end of the battle phase, you can activate this card from your hand if you control no face-up cards on the field. And then I'm paraphrasing this, I'm getting it wrong, but actually, why not I just Google it? Evenly Match. Let me make sure I'm being very specific. I can type properly. That would be great. So Evenly Match says. At the end of the battle phase, if your opponent controls more cards than you do, you can make your opponent banish cards from their field face down so they control the same number of cards as you do. If you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand. This card is often used when going second to break your opponent's board. You go main phase, battle phase, end the battle phase, activate Evenly Match. And then they will have to banish cards on their field until they only have 1 card left because you control 1 card on the field. What is amazing about Evenly Matched is 1, it banishes these cards face down, and there aren't many cards in the game that can get a card back once they have been banished face down. B, it doesn't affect the opponent, it affects the player. So this card is really, really good against effects that say, oh, we're unaffected by trap cards or unaffected by card effects. because it's not making the player, it's not affecting the card. It's telling the player you have to choose what to banish. And so if it's not really the card that's banishing it. It's not really the card that's making the decision. It's the player who controls the card that is choosing to banish them. Evenly match works really well against tokens as well. Because tokens cannot be banished, your opponent has to choose another card. So if your opponent has, say, a Nibiru token or something on the field, some kind of token, that is the one card that they will have to leave on the field to match the evenly matched. And then you'll get rid of all of their other cards by game mechanics. It's a very good card. But where it's not popular right now is because there are other cards in the game that are maybe more popular than it, like Lightning Storm right now, or Harpie Feather Duster, that kind of provide a similar effect. It doesn't negate anything, so Forbidden Droplets kind of does that for you. And also you have to use your battle phase in order to do this. Other than going second, evenly match doesn't really have a lot of applications. So if you go first, it's kind of a dead card as well. So it's good. It's very powerful, but it's better in a game where you have a side deck and you can know if you're going to go first or second due to coin toss or having lost the game or so. But it's still a very good card overall. Another board breaker card is Torrential Tribute. Very popular card in the game. It's the only rare card on... Oh, there's another one. It's one of the only rare cards on this list, and it's very cheap and easy to make. So it's very popular in Master Duel. Torrential Tribute is great. It's great when you go first and you want to interrupt your opponent and blow up their field. It's reliable at all points of the game. It's an old school card, so it's a popular favorite of people. And yeah, it's non-targeted destruction that can interrupt your opponent during their turn. What's not to really love about Torrential Tribute? It doesn't negate anything. It doesn't. There are many cards that don't care about being destroyed that float. But TT is very reliable to use. And like I said, it's also very cheap to make. So it's very popular. That brings me to Kaijus. Kaijus are currently B+ tier. They're not very used very often. But where they are, Kaijus are very reliable because they get rid of an opponent's monster on the field by tributing over it. The most popular Kaiju in the game right now is Gardarla, because Gardarla is a win Kaiju. And right now for a certain deck called Tri-Brigade Lyrilisk, they like to often end on boards where they summon out a Simorg link monster and then get from their deck a card called Barrier Statue of the Winds. Storm Winds or the Winds, one of the two. And it makes it so that neither player can special summon a card except a wind monster. And so people like to play Gardarla over any other Kaiju so they can tribute that wind monster, and then that way they can then do their special summons. I guess Kaijus aren't really popular in the game right now because when you use a Kaiju, you're going neg. You're giving your opponent one of your cards, but you're getting rid of a really powerful threat. And it doesn't have a lot of synergy with a lot of decks, so it doesn't really do a whole lot. But Kaijus are very reliable as monster removal. Similar, in fact, to Lava Golem. Lava Golem is a very unique card. You don't see it in a lot of decks, but some decks that can run it, like Lich and Mech Knights, really love Lava Golem. And again, it's another tribute card that tributes 2 monsters on the field to summon it to your opponent's field. The downside is that you cannot normal summon the turn you summon a Lava Golem, so you're losing that ability. Lava Golem is very good though at breaking boards, and if you can run it in a deck with that or a Kaiju or even both of them, you really don't mind going second at all because your opponent can summon a bunch of negates and then you can put this on their board. And there are some cards that say they cannot be tributed, but there's very few boss monsters in the game that do that. So these two are very good cards. Another card that's very good at breaking boards right now is Super Polymerization. Super Polymerization can fusion summon monsters on both sides of the field by discarding one card. However, when you activate this card, your opponent cannot chain to it at all. So it's a very reliable card. It plays through negates and it breaks boards. Quite often more than not, the card that people like to use this with is a card called Mud Dragon of the Swamp. This card can be fusion summoned by using 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types. Against Lich, not against Lich, it doesn't do anything, but against Tri-Brigade, you can they have multiple wind monsters on the board but different types, so you can summon this. Against Drytron, they often have a Herald, which is a light fairy, and then a machine monster Drytron, like Drytron Fafnir, which is a light machine monster. So Mud Dragon of the Swamp works well. But other cards it can be used with quite well is Starving Venom Dragon. Starving Venom is very popular as well, as it requires 2 dark monsters in the field except tokens. And where you are often seeing a super polymerization being used is in decks which are fusion based anyway. So fusion decks like Shadows, or fusion decks like Invoke, or even like the new Despair decks like love to use super polymerization, where they have monsters in their deck already that can summon from both sides of the field and have generic answers. For example, Shadow Winder, it requires a Shadow monster and a Dark monster. So if your opponent has a Dark monster, you can make a Shadow Winder. Or a Light monster can make Construct. Or you can make a Mechaba. Or you can make Despair Luba monster. Despair have total so many options for Super Poly. Or heroes even, maybe be able to use Super Poly. There's many ways to use Super Poly. Right now you're seeing it a lot in Eldritch. Eldritch loves Super Poly because Eldritch does not care about their extra deck at all. So they use Extravagance and Super Poly, and they just hope to break their opponent's board when they're forced to go second. It's a very powerful card, and currently is A tier in the game. Couple more cards left to talk about. Let's see. Let's start from the bottom of the list and work our way up. And so towards the bottom of the list, well, there's nothing really bad here anymore. Let's start off with Solemn Judgment. Solemn Judgment, A- tier. Solemn Judgment, one of the best cards, if not the best card in the game to put into your deck if you know you're going to go first. It negates pretty much anything. And if you can set up a good board and have a Solemn Judgment put down, you can protect that board from many forms of disruption. It stops lightning storms, it stops Harpie Feather Duster. You can use it for things like Call by the Grave. You can negate summons like Accesscode Talker. It's just really good and very reliable. But it is expensive, and it does take half your life points in order to use it. What Solemn Judgment doesn't do is it doesn't negate monster effects. So if a monster is already on the field and has been summoned, you can't then use Solemn Judgment against it at all. So people then prefer to use Solemn Strike. Solemn Strike, it only costs 1500 life points, and can negate the effect of a monster and destroy that monster. These are also both continuous trap cards, so it's very unlikely for any other card in the game to chain to these cards and their activations because they're not spell speed 3 or higher. Where Solemn Judgment is amazing going first, Strike is amazing going first and second, because even if your opponent has a crazy board of negates on the field, like a Herald of Ultimateness, you can just set the Solemn Strike, wait for your turn to end, and then during your opponent's turn, use something to bait out a negation, chain the strike, and you're almost guaranteed to get rid of that card. That doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win, because they have ways to get back their ritual monsters, but still, it's still a very powerful option. Next on the list, we have then Vanity's Emptiness, which is currently an A tier card. Vanity's Emptiness is very powerful. It is a continuous trap card that says neither player can special summon monsters. However, it commits suicide if a card is sent from your deck or your field to the graveyard. So it's very easy to pop this card. And with mass removal being in the game right now, with Harpie Feather Duster being live and Lightning Storm being around everywhere, it's not as crazy as it used to be. This card used to be like amazing in the game, and if you ran 3 of these, you were so good at shutting down your opponent. And if you went first, you can build your board, set Vanity's Emptiness, and then during your opponent's turn, they try to play, flip it over, and just be like, nah, it's not gonna happen. But there's so many forms of cosmic spell and trap removal in the game right now that this really isn't reliable. And even then, you also have to say to yourself, I cannot afford to send cards to my graveyard because I'll lose my Vanity's Emptiness as well. What's really annoying with this card is when, say, your opponent gets rid of another card in your field and then your Vanity's Emptiness automatically pops. For example, if they say Raigeki your board, then you lose both this card and all your monsters. So it's a double-edged sword, but it's still a very powerful card overall. Let's do Triple Tactics Talents. This card isn't very popular right now in the game and is currently considered to be a B+ card, but it's very versatile. This card says if your opponent has activated a monster effect during this turn, you can either A, draw 2 cards, B, take control of one monster they control, and C, look at their hand and shuffle 1 card from their hand back into the deck. It is very powerful. It has a wide variety of effects, And the only reason why you don't see this card used more often is because of Call by the Grave and Crossout Designator. It kind of fulfills that role of being an anti-hand trap card. For when you are trying to set up your board and your opponent then hand traps you, you get to counter it. But it's this idea of being reactive versus being proactive. These cards can react to the activation of a hand trap and negate it outright. Whereas this has to let the card go through and then you can use this card. And in more situations than not, you don't really want your opponent negating your cards because that's too beneficial to them to do so. So it has some applications, and where you are seeing this played, people are maybe only playing one copy of it, maybe like 2 Cool Buys and 1 Triple Tactics Talents. But if these cards were ever to be banned, I could see this card definitely rising in popularity to more than where it is right now. Almost at the end of this thing, we're going to quickly wrap this up with a couple more cards. We have Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess. Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess is a very easy to make Link 4 monster, a lot like Accesscode, where Accesscode is often used to go second to break people's boards and attack the game. Apollousa is often used when going first to put up a couple of negates. She gets 800 attack for every monster used to summon her, and then for during either player's turn, once per chain, you can reduce her attack by 800 to negate the effect of a monster. She's often used in Tri-Brigade at the moment as a way to set up their first turn board, but even Tri-Brigade players are dropping her for other things right now, particularly in pure Tri-Brigade. But she's still very good and very reliable and is used in many decks overall. Then we have Dinowrestler Pankratops, another A tier card. Dinowrestler Pankratops used to be everywhere in the game. He is an amazing beast. He's 2600 dinosaur that can be summoned if your opponent has more monsters than you do, and then he has the quick effect ability to tribute itself in order to destroy one card on the field. It's very, very good. You can use it to be very aggressive and push the game, attack your opponent's monsters, and then anytime you want to, you can tribute and get rid of a card on the field. It gives you a lot of value for money, and it's a very good card overall, but it's only at 1 right now, so most people don't opt to use it. And then finally, we have Zeus. Zeus, like the final S tier card in the game. Zeus is everywhere right now. If you're playing an XZ deck, you're playing Zeus. Virtual World plays Zeus. Zodiac plays Zeus. Even Tritron can play Zeus, as they can make XZ based decks. XZ summons as well. It's so easy to make a Zeus, and then you end up with a really powerful boss monster that can sit in defense position, and during your opponent's turn, anytime you want to, you can send all cards on the field to the graveyard. It is incredibly powerful, easy to summon, and even though he's limited to 1, he's just everywhere in the game right now, and I think he will continue to be that way for a long time until this card gets banned. So that is the list and the tier list overall. There is a lot of cards to consider in this game, and as you can see, there are many ultra rares in this game and super rares that are considered, say, staples right now. I want to end this video by switching over to the game and quickly talking a little bit about deck building and how to apply this knowledge that you've now gained. So we're going to switch over to the game right now, and so let's do that. So what we're often seeing in Master Duel when people are building decks is something like this. Almost every single deck in the game is running 3 copies of Maxx C. In order to counter the Maxx C, everybody's running Ash Blossom 2. But because you don't want these two just to be opposite to each other and you want to be able to use them elsewhere, people are then using Call by the Grave. And so that's already 8 cards in the deck. If people are playing other generic cards, they're also adding Crossout Designator between 1 to 3 copies. And so this is kind of considered the standard template for a lot of decks in the game right now, where almost every deck is running that. Now then the question becomes, do you want to maximize your Maxx C effect by running more hand traps? And so if you want to be able to resolve Maxx C and you protect it with these cards, and so it goes off, you're then going to want cards in order to draw more cards out. And often what you're seeing is like 1 Nibiru, double Gamma with the driver, I'm not going to bother adding it, and then things like maybe Impermanence thrown in there, and maybe any other hand traps like Belle you're seeing as well. But those cards differ, they're not always present in decks, and Gamma is very popular, but even that card's not around. In addition to that, you're seeing a pot card, most often than not Pot of Prosperity, where people are running this card as another way to bait out interruption, so that they play Pot of Prosperity and then they say use a Tenki, or they use a Drytron Nova in order to then be able to make their plays without fear of having Ash Blossom to negate them, whatever is relevant to your deck. But pretty much every deck is running some form of spell starter in order to counter the Ash Blossom. And then almost every deck is running Harpie Feather Duster and 2 Lightning Storms. Just so that you don't have a choice whether you're going to go first or second in this game too often than not. And so if you end up going second, you often want ways to break boards, and so you kind of want these cards around. Again, like I said earlier in the video, it could be Twin Twisters, it could be Cosmic, but more often than not, people are using Lightning Storm as it works against monsters and or trap cards and spell cards. And then finally, there are many decks in this game right now which set up boards with very, very powerful monsters that do negate, and so people are running 3 copies of Forbidden Droplets. Again, like I said, it's very versatile. You could activate Prosperity, chain Droplets, and then you fulfill this requirement in order to do a negate. You can get rid of hand traps that you don't want, like say a Maxx C during your turn. You could send that to the graveyard, so then your opponent can't chain to this card and then can't negate it. So it's very, very useful. But this is what I'm seeing in almost every single deck right now, and it's basically a question of can you play these 18 cards, and then can you fill out the rest of your deck with the remaining 22 cards. I could show you many examples, but one example that I can show you, for example, is Tri-Brigade Zodiac, a deck that I own currently, and again it has all of those measures, and then the remaining cards work really well. So it has the Maxx C, it has the Ash Blossom, it has these removal cards, it has the Prosperity, and then it has the Forbidden Droplets and the Call by the Grave, and then it also has 1 Nibiru as well. For me, I was just testing that out. And then so the remaining 21 to 22 cards are cards which have to be able to play the game on their own. And so what's great about why Tri-Brigade is working so well, for example, is that a lot of these cards are starters. Everything from all of these cards can work as starter cards. You can normal summon them and go into other cards, and so all of these cards can also play through things like Ash Blossom, and so you have multiple ways of carrying a card, and that is kind of what the meta is right now. So I hope you guys have found this video useful. The meta will continue to evolve, and I plan to do another one of these and update this list in next season. And hopefully we see a ban list that adds that changes what the format is, and therefore we see some adjustments. But right now there are so many different cards you can play in the game, and if you are new to the game, these are the cards I would recommend you prioritize maybe looking at, because they are usable in many different decks. That's been the tier list for best cards in Season 4 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I'll see you soon. Take care.